Okay, everyone, let's get started. As I mentioned, this is Lori from SedonaOffice, and we thought it would be a good idea to have another webinar on SedonaSync. I'm always amazed at how much it does for our customers and for us internally. And so I thought, who's the best person to show it? Obviously, the experts, OPT. So for today's webinar, Brad's going to focus on the beginning portion of SedonaSync, how you would build an event, just to give you some of the basics. And then he's going to go into some of the services that OPT provides. If anybody there is not familiar with OPT, when we first started having SedonaSync as an add-on module, Brad and Chris decided to make this a truly robust function of SedonaOffice. Many of our customers use multiple different events and services from OPT to manage their business. So they're the perfect people to give this presentation today. And he's probably going to talk a little bit at the end about their web services. But what we're doing is we're going to schedule a whole new webinar on that for a future date. But just so you know, we have almost 100 people that have already logged into this. So thank you so much for attending. And be aware of the different emails that are coming out. Our goal is to keep showing you some of the new things in SedonaOffice, as well as showing you some of the functionality for our existing modules. So right, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Brad. All right, Brad, you're the presenter.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm actually very amazed. We've had, like Lori said, we've had a great turnout here. I think we had about 150 people registered, got over 100 people have joined already. Today, as Lori mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about SedonaSync, how we set up that application and set up an event and a query. And we're going to talk a little bit about how OPT makes the process a little easier, some of the functionality that we bring to the table and what we can do to really create some very dynamic and very robust sync events. And then we're going to talk about our web services platform. As Lori mentioned, that's it's going to be a follow-up webinar on that as well. But what I do want to mention today, and we'll talk and I'll point out as we go along, is where the web services application really extends the functionality of what's going to be done in SedonaSync and SedonaOffice. All right. So without going too much further of a look into SedonaSync, haven't seen the product already. SedonaSync is broken into two really core modules, and that's what we call our SedonaSync queries and our SedonaSync events. And the way it works is you create a query or something that you're trying to get the information from the database. And what's really powerful about SedonaSync is it's not just limited to SedonaOffice, but you can query the Manitou database, QuoteWorks, G Suite, any third-party database that you have access to, providing you have the license in SedonaSync, you can query that information. And with getting a little creative, you can actually match the data up between applications and do some really interesting reporting that way. All right, so the query is what we're actually extracting from the database. So that's going to be either your the notification that you want to send out or the raw data for the report. And then the event side of the SedonaSync events is what we're actually going to do with that data. Are we going to email it out as an alert, which is what we call just a simple notification, something that alerts somebody that there's something going on? Or are we going to email out a report, which is a detailed list of all the data that qualifies? In addition to the email notifications, SedonaSync can be used to create additional workflows, dashboards, other types of actions. It can write data from one system to the other. It can update data within the application. So it's very versatile what it can do. So as we mentioned, the alerts, it's going to tell us when we have a notification, and the reports are going to be that detailed event. In addition, we can also grab other types of reports using things like Crystal Reports and other reporting engines we can tie in to the SedonaSync application. And the workflows is going to allow us to possibly create new data. We can import, export data. We can create different types of Excel files or CSV files with that. And then we can create entire workflows where we chain one event to the other. Based on when this happens, we do this, and then however we respond to that, we can go on to the next one. The SedonaSync application is broken into 3 licensed modules. The first module is what we call our alerts module. This is the ability for you to grab the information from the database. So it's the basic core functionality of SedonaSync. The reports module is a little extra, lets you go ahead and use the Crystal Reports engine. You can also create graphs and charts and things like that that get associated with your notifications and your reports. And then the actions module is what actually does the two-way data. That's what's going to allow you to write back or create files and things like that. So that's the SedonaSync actions module. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at a simple report that could be generated here. And this is just an example of something that we can grab. So we have parts with their less than required quantities. So we've got a listing of the inventory within SedonaOffice, and we've looked at some of the setup information and analyzed whether or not the minimum quantity is being met or not. So it's a simple type of notification that we can grab that information that's readily available and then deliver that report to somebody, let's say on a daily basis, that would be necessary to have them update the inventory, order additional parts, and whatnot. So the reports, as we mentioned, the reports are going to give us a little bit more of a complex visualization. This is going to allow us to grab an RPT file. If you have a developer on staff that can create the Crystal report files, you can attach them to sync events, and then you can also use it to create charts and graphs. And we use this for our the PDF invoicing and statements that we've created as well. So we can do that out of SedonaSync, and that's done through using the reports module. And it's an example of a simple notification that's grabbing a few pieces of data throughout the database, and then we've created a simple chart to give us the RMR totals by customer type, and we've included that chart there along with that notification. And as we mentioned, the actions allows us to write either back to the database. We can write SQL commands. We also can export data to a CSV or a text file. We do Excel through XML. We can also create a file to put data into it, like an XML or an HTML file that can be used as a real-time dashboard. Here at OPT, we've also built a RESTful API. So if you have some technical staff as well, we can integrate to third-party products like FormStack or Salesforce, things like that, by pushing out webhooks from the SedonaSync application. And we could talk more about that, but that's a little bit out of scope here. Here's an example, again, of a notification that went out, or a report rather, and then we included an Excel file of more detail that's what generated the report. So again, we've used the SedonaSync and we've used the actions to compile this Excel file and then attach it to the notification that goes out. Okay, so that's kind of a little bit about what the SedonaSync product can do, and let's talk about how we actually go about doing that. So to start, what we're going to need to do is we create an application inside the SedonaSync application, and then we're going to create a query. So there's a couple different steps to doing that. The first thing we do after we've created the query is we need to go ahead and name the query. So in this particular example, I'm going to say that we want to create a notification that notifies the customer when they have an appointment coming up. So this notification I'm calling the appointments X days past due, or X days out rather. Now, what the next thing I have to do is go and grab all the relevant pieces of information from SedonaOffice I'm going to need in my notification. Here I've collected the different tables that contain the information that I'm going to be using. SedonaOffice has a great tool called the Database Explorer that's available on their website that'll help you determine which database tables contain the information that you may be looking for. Also, a little pro tip here is you can use the query builder in SedonaOffice and then click on the SQL button to generate the actual code that's used by the query builder, and you can reproduce that in the SedonaSync application. Okay, so here I've grabbed the customer site, the system, and I've grabbed some service ticket related tables as well. The next step is then going to be to join these tables together. So where we've had information in the service ticket table, we need to link that to the system table. We need to link the system to the site, and so on and so forth. So what you would do here is you would select the table on the left side, and then there would be a table on the right side, and you have to pick the two columns that match together. Okay. Again, the query builder can really assist here. You could take a look at the joins and how they do that there. And that's usually enough information in the query builder to figure out how to join the stuff together. Next, we're going to go ahead and select the columns that we want to include within the query. This is the data that's going to be pulled back in for the report or the notification. Okay, so what it's going to do is we're going to pick the different pieces of data. We'll give it a name. And then we also have the opportunity here to create advanced columns. So we needed a column here called days out that allowed us to know how many days out the appointment was, because we wanted to we're going to show you in a minute, we only want to notify users that they have an appointment, if it's tomorrow. We don't want to notify them if it's a week out. So we need to know how many days out that appointment is. So after we've gone ahead and created the column, the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to, here's an example of the column, where we've taken the current date and compared it against the scheduled time, and we get the number of days. The functions are, some of the conversion functions and add functions are actually listed in the application, so it's easy to select it and then just pick the two columns that you want to compare. We're going to select the sorting that we want to sort the event by. So here I want to sort it by ticket number and schedule time. And here's where I set up my filters. So I've set up that I only care about dispatches that have a time, and we schedule time rather. And then we want to know that column that we created for days out. We want to know how many days out it's going to be. And what I did here is I used a question mark, which allows me to answer this question later on. This is why the name of the report, or the query rather, is appointments X days out, because I can set any value to that I want later on. And that will make more sense in a little bit. Okay. And then I also have here a filter, which is very important. We've grabbed the email address called auto notify on the service ticket. That's the actual email address on the service ticket itself. But what we need to do is make sure that it's valid and that somebody didn't type an invalid email address in there. So using a quick little check, we're just making sure that there's an @ symbol and a period, that it looks like a valid email address. This way, it will get rid of any kind of tickets that don't have an email address or don't have a valid one. This way, it doesn't cause a problem when we're running the notification. And now, the whole point of this was to essentially generate this SQL. And this code is generated by selecting those columns and adding all that information. You don't need to worry about how this SQL is generated unless you have a developer on staff or somebody who can write the SQL. They actually can paste their own code in here instead of using all the other tabs. So if you have something already written, you can drop it in here. You also can drop the query directly from the query builder in here as well. There are some limitations to what this can do. Specifically, when we talk about tracking a little later, it's going to be one of the things that's not supported here. But it is very useful for a quick and down and dirty notification. And the last thing we always do is we always preview to make sure that the query works and that we get back the intended data here. I previewed it and I see I've got several appointments that are coming up that qualify. These would theoretically be the appointments that we would notify on. Okay. We're going to just jump away for 1 second on this. I just want to talk about the reports here. So the next step we would do is we would define a report or a chart if we wanted to include a notification like that. So in the SedonaSync application, we can go through and define a chart. And the setup is a little bit different here. We're going to pick the type of chart that we have. We're going to give it a name. We're going to give it a file type, and we're going to have to then write a query that goes along with that as well. So here we would add query and then write the actual query that we needed to get back the information. And usually for a pie chart, it's going to be 2 pieces of information. You just need to get back the name and the quantity. And here in this case, I did the number of appointments by priority. So I can see that I've got 3 in the medium, 3 in the high, and 2 on the low. Okay. Now that chart gets saved as a JPEG or a PNG file, whatever you set, and then you can actually include that in your notification, and we'll show you where that button is in a minute. Okay, going back to the event that we were creating, we're going to talk about actually creating the event side now. We built the query, we saved it, we tested and previewed it, and it worked. Now we're writing the event side. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go in, we're going to create a new event. We're going to give it a name, appointment reminder. Then we're going to pick the query that we've created before with an add query. And you'll see now that it says appointments X days out. And now down in the bottom half, we actually have to answer that question we put a question mark in before. Now it's saying, well, how many days out do you want to notify on? Well, we want to notify when it's 1 day out. Now you could put 3 days out if you wanted to notify on Friday for appointments on a Monday, but keep in mind that that would also notify Friday's appointments on Wednesday. So it's just something you'd have to think about. You can get very creative, and if, with a little bit more SQL, you can probably create something that changes the number of days based on it being a weekend or a weekday, but it's, again, a little bit more complex. Reports here. So if I did want to add that report, I've already created and designed it before. Here, I'm just going to add that report in. You also have the ability to add in static file attachments. So these things would be things like promotional flyers or other types of information that you want to include in the event. They're fixed. They've been set up one time. You can add them in, and it just basically goes out and grabs that file, attaches it to the notification, and sends it along with the email. The email tab itself is where we're going to create the actual notification. First thing we do is we're going to define a subject. We have the ability to adjust the reply to email address as well. So that's the email address from which the notification is going to come from. Now, keep in mind that this is, depends on the support of your email server. Some email servers allow you to put anything in there you want, and others restrict it down to valid accounts. You want to check with your IT department to make sure that that setup is correct. Then we would define the subject of the notification, and then in the message text itself is what we're actually going to say to the customer. So in this particular case, it's a simple notification. We're saying your upcoming service call, and then we can grab from the top there the different variables. Those would be the columns from the query that we created, and we could drag them down into the notification. So in this case, I say the current date and time, which is a system variable that's going to generate based on when the actual notification goes. And then we're going to say, dear business name, which happens to be the site name in SedonaOffice. We'd like to remind you of our upcoming service point, blah, 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 blah. And then we can complete that notification out. Now, what's important to know here is that the message text is raw text here. If you wanted the notification to be in a formatted text, something that looks like a modern email, you would need to go ahead and consult an HTML developer that could create that HTML and drop that into here as well. They would use the variables, and you can put the variables throughout the HTML and bring it in here. There are some free resources out there. W3 Schools is a great learning tool that you can use to learn HTML. And then there's some other toolkits out there that can generate some basic HTML for you. I know that MailChimp is also very good for providing some templates and things like that. Okay. All right, next, if we did need to do an action, so one common action that we like to do at OPT with all of our customer-facing notifications is we write back to the service ticket or the job that we actually sent out the notification. So a user that's looking at the application can look quickly in and see that we've sent out a notification on behalf of the, for the customer. So what we've done here is we've created a SQL submission. It's going to add a record into the notes table. And here we've just used a simple insert query. insert to the note. We're going to pull the information from the query. Now, again, this is something you would need to be very careful with because since you are writing data back to the database, it's very risky if you don't know what you're doing here. So you definitely want to consult a developer that knows how to write into the database and make sure that you're following all the standard processes here, making sure that the data is going in correctly. The next thing we're going to do is define a subscriber. This is who we're actually going to send the notification to. And there's two types of subscribers. You have the standard subscribers. These are people that are set up ahead of time in your SedonaSync application, okay, such as like management or some internal staff, things like that. Okay, that's not going to be the customer themselves. It's just going to be people that should get a copy of this notification. The next tab, the advanced tab, however, is where we can put in a field that we're actually going to grab the email address from and dynamically send it to that email address. So here, the email address section, we've used the auto notify field. That is the field off the service ticket. Okay, remember we've checked in the query to make sure it's valid. Okay, or at least syntactically, it's got the correct format. Okay, but we're going to grab that email address and send it there. Now, the other part of this is the message break. This is how we determine when the notification should stop and the next notification should start. And for every row that comes back in the SQL query, which one is unique? Which column defines this as unique? And that is, for this type of notification, the dispatch ID. That is, the actual instance of the appointment itself. That's what's going to be unique. So we say every time the dispatch ID changes, we're sending out a new notification. Using a combination of different types of fields and combining data together, you can get very creative with the unique indexes, and you can cause different types of grouped notifications or other things like that. But you want to play around with that a little bit and see what you can do there. Okay. And then we're also going to then set the schedule. This is how often the notification should fire out. In this particular case, we're firing it daily at 5 p.m. And then the tracking tab itself, if we've set up a unique index and we set the event to track, what that means is that the system is going to remember the fact that we sent this notification. That dispatch ID being the unique value, it's tracked in here and says, okay, we've sent a notification out for this ID. We're not going to send a notification again. Tomorrow when I run it, if that appointment is still there, I'm not sending that notification because I've already notified. Now, in a case of a report, you may actually want to keep repeating that notification. I want to see all my open service tickets. Well, if you were notified on Monday, you may still want to be notified on Friday that it is open. So in that case, you would not use the tracking. But for a notification or a report that only should be notified once, the tracking is going to be useful here. We can during testing, we can actually grab any one of these already tracked items, remove it, and we can then refire the notification. So if somebody claimed they didn't get their notification, you want to resend it, you would have to come out here, delete the record, and then refire off the event. Okay. A couple other things that you can do here, as we mentioned, you can create a file, a CSV or an Excel. That's under the Actions tab here. I've used this as an example to write through a dashboard. It's an actual HTML file that contains information about those upcoming appointments. So it's a quick file that I set to store on a web server. I can access that file at any time and see the updated notifications. Now, there is one thing in here I'd like to mention before we move on to the next section, is the concept of begin and repeat. Okay, either in the email or the options tab, if we define something called a begin and repeat, what that's going to do is it's going to show us it's going to essentially repeat the data over and over and over again. So for instance, in a report where you have 10 items in the report, you would need to repeat the information for each one of those 10 items. So by using the begin and repeat flag, we can tell the system, okay, these columns are going to be repeated in a repetitive kind of manner. We're just going to keep updating that information and going on to the next record, and we're going to keep doing that until we reach the message break. So where we had the dispatch ID, in this particular case, it would show one record, one dashboard for every record. But if we took that off and we said, nope, we want to show everything, we would then not use a message break and just use a begin and repeat instead. Okay, so that is SedonaSync in a nutshell. If you guys have any questions, feel free to post the questions to the webinar now. We're going to have some time at the end to answer those questions. And what I'd like to talk about now is how OPT makes this process a little easier for you guys. So what we've created is something called the OPT sync interface. The sync interface is an add-on that helps us create SedonaSync events much quicker and allows us to really customize what can be done in that application. Okay, so this is the foundation of all of our reports, our events, and our workflows. Everything that we do is centralized through this sync interface, and we use a number that associates each individual thing that we've created. So you'll see on our website, we have a list of all the different events and notifications and things like that that we've pre-built already for you guys. And each one of those has its own unique number. In our interfaces where we go and we can take a look at how we set each one of those things up. The interface itself is an easy to use editor that we've created that lets us customize the events, and we can actually store some additional information in the interface that helps us build those events, things like custom HTML or custom messages and things like that. Okay, and we also have a log file in there that allows you to track the progress of the sync events and the reports and things like that. Here's an example of the interface here. And we'll switch over to what this actually allows us to do. So as I mentioned before, the notifications go out in basic raw text. Unless you have some HTML skills, the notification is going to be pretty generic, pretty plain. What the interface allows us to do is create a template that goes along with the notification. So we define one time all the HTML that we would need for all of our notifications and our events. And then we apply that particular template to the notification itself. Here you can see the top section is what it would look like without the styling. And then we've created a styling template. Now it looks more like a table. Okay, so we've created that and it allows you to customize that. Now, in addition to the templates, we also allow you to customize the events themselves from the raw data. So notice that this editor is actually more of a friendly editor that you're used to seeing in Microsoft Word or something like that. And what we're doing here is we're essentially making the process a lot simpler. This is what it would look like if you were using raw HTML, and this is what it looks like using our editor. So you actually don't need to touch the raw HTML. You're just going to use our editor, and we're going to generate that HTML for you. It's going to push this information back into SedonaSync automatically, and then that information will, this new HTML will be used instead of the hand-coded stuff. Okay. Here's an example. As we mentioned, each one of our events have an event number, and here's the different ones that this particular customer had set up. Simple technician stop, summary report. And then what we've done is we've actually created some custom messages that go along with that. We actually have the ability to set up a message that's going to run for a certain period of time and will come off automatically. And then we essentially add that into the notification during the time window that it's allowed. And when it expires, we pull it out for you. So there's some automation there as well. This can be used for all different types of things, and we'll talk about some of the use cases in a little bit. And as we mentioned before, this is where we would set up the styling. Okay, and we can go in here and set a footer, for instance, that goes in the bottom of every notification. Maybe we want to set up some headers, some logos and things like that that go along with the notifications themselves. And then in the actual event, we actually select which group, if you will, that's going to go with this. So we can create multiple different templates and select which template each notification should use. If we use one template, that's great. Otherwise, we can create multiple different templates for different purposes. Some companies will create one for billing department, and the others, and they'll create a separate one for like the service department. As we mentioned, we have those dynamic messages. So, example of a holiday message here that we'd set up and set a runtime for it, just during the holiday time period. Okay. And then we can associate up to 4 of those messages within the notification. So you're going to select the notification, and we'd select which temporary or permanent message block we wanted to include with it. There's an example there of a payment details message block that we added to a invoice notification. So this was, instead of being a temporary message block, this was a permanent message block that gets included on all invoice notifications. So we would include that drop down. So we only create that code one time, and that block can be reused on every type of invoice or billing notification. And here's an example of some of the custom messages that we have available. So we actually allowed you to set up custom messages, not only for the individual events, but we can have what we call dynamic messages, messages that change based on the data in the database themselves. So for instance, every time you use a different branch for a notification, I would use a different message. Or if a popular one is on the service level, on a service message, you may want to put in the terms and conditions for that particular service level. So instead of creating maybe 10 different sync notifications, all with the different message that you would need for each one and with filters down to the service level, you can use a single notification, make the notification exactly the same for every single service level except the block that changes out, so with the terms and conditions. So you would essentially go into our interface and set up, you'd pick the service level and then select the appropriate message for each one. Again, we have this, by almost every single drop down at this point. This is just a short list. We have quite a bit more since this list was made. Just about every drop down that you'll see in SedonaOffice can be customized with one of our dynamic messages. In addition to the dynamic messages, we also have a couple static messages, or static dynamic rather, messages that we give you automatically, and these can be customized, but they're specifically for the purposes of recommending AutoPay to your customers. So we actually look at their AutoPay status and say, okay, well, if you're using AutoPay, thank you for keeping the planet green. But if you're not, you can sign up online, set up for AutoPay. You can pay us with a credit card. Just recommending those services because everybody loves AutoPay. Keeps your customers sticky. And then in addition, we also can advertise the AutoPay for service and bill and job invoices as well. So some of the other custom data that we're storing, allowing you to store in addition to just the messages, is things like email addresses that don't fit into SedonaOffice currently. So for instance, under the vendor or the warehouse or the sales department install companies and the branches, you don't have a dedicated email address for notifications. So what we've done is we've created a email address repository, if you will, that gets associated to the different drop downs in SedonaOffice. Now, of course, you could use a custom to field on some of these things, but certainly a sales department and an install company doesn't have a drop down for that. So this is the place where you can set these different email addresses up. For a vendor, it's very useful when we're sending out things like purchase order verifications or the full PO to the vendor and things like that. And as I mentioned before, we have some API functionality. This is where this is set up as well. We have a basic URL builder that allows us to create the request to a RESTful API using a webhook. But we can go into more detail offline if anybody has any questions about how that works. But essentially, this allows us to integrate to things like FormStack, SurveyMonkey, Acton, and whatnot. Some of the custom data that we can store is a lot of information based on problem codes and priority codes and things like that. We can set up different color codes that we can use in dashboards or sync notifications. And again, that information just changes out based on the problem code that's used and whatnot. Here's an example of just some of the custom information that we're talking about, all the different branch emails, the different departmental emails. We can store signatures by employee. We have mapping so we can map different codes to different things, all the company related information that you may want to store in your notification, things like your website URL, your Sedona web URL and whatnot. So that's all stored within our interface. Now the interface allows us to create a lot of different types of notifications, but one really popular one we're doing right now is our email invoice. Now SedonaOffice does offer some simple email invoicing functionality, but if you really want to take advantage of all of the flexibility that SedonaSync has to offer, we can really customize the invoice notifications for you guys using SedonaSync and our interface. So they do also provide, SedonaOffice does also provide 2 sync notifications that you can use. The basic invoice notification, which allows you to just notify customer there is an invoice available in their Sedona web. And then the other one is their basic cycle notification. But keep in mind that the cycle notification is just that. It's not a replacement for email invoicing because it doesn't remove it from any of the queues. It just notifies the customer that they have an invoice with some basic details. This is an example of those notifications. And both of those notifications are going to still require you to set up some custom HTML, and customize it to look, like the way you want to have it delivered. Now, our notifications, we set up, we actually provide the service, the customization service with our notifications. So we'll work with you guys to get your logos in there, to get the format correct. And we offer the email invoicing in several different ways. We can do it as a HTML invoice with the customization there, your logo. It looks just like the invoice out of SedonaOffice would. Okay, and then we also have the ability to do a modular format. This is more of a friendly invoice format that you can add and remove modules to. And then we have the PDF invoicing as well, which essentially attaches a PDF file to the invoice that goes out, or the invoice notification. This is usually required for any kind of automated payment system that some of these bigger customers use. So, it sucks the invoice in and automatically cuts you a check or whatnot. So those systems require you to send it via PDF. All right, and we do have the ability to turn on and off the PDFs by customer. So if you did want to have certain customers have PDFs and certain ones use HTML or the download process, those would be something we can set up for you. Okay. We also have the PDF in several different formats. The standard SedonaOffice format. We support all 3 Bridgestone formats. We have a couple custom formats that we created for some customers. The European format. We've now got the Australian format. But there's several different formats that we support, and we do create custom formats for our customers as well. Okay. The workflow here, I'm going to kind of skip through this pretty quick because we're running a little short here on time. There is a few things that need to be set up in order for email invoicing to work. Okay, we need to make sure that the emails are actually being delivered to the queue. So we want to make sure that they're set up to print. We also, we can set up in our side, whether or not we notify on cycle invoices, job invoices, service, or miscellaneous. So if you wanted service to go through the standard print process, but cycle to be emailed, we can support that. We have, a ton of options on the routing and the workflow of how the invoices go out. In SedonaOffice, this is the typical setup. We need to make sure that the print cycle invoices are on. Now, this is going to change a little bit with the release of the new email invoicing options within SedonaOffice, but we'll be on top of that as soon as that stuff is available. So currently, right now, we have an email invoice checkbox on the Bill To tab and an email address that's associated there. Now, there will be the ability to add in additional emails, and there'll be additional email checkboxes and things like that. Okay, and if you ever needed to reprocess an invoice for email, we can simply add that back to the print queue, and then our system actually goes out and grabs those out of the print queue and sees that they're set up for email invoicing and sends them off to the customer. So a sample workflow here, we look at the SedonaOffice invoice print queue. We have a process that goes in, grabs those invoices out because they can be emailed, and then we move into what we call our email queue, and then we process that email off to the customer and send that notification out. we're actually the email queue is grabbing information for several different areas. We're actually grabbing it from the SedonaOffice database, and we're going to grab the styling and logo and information from our interface database. We could then go out and send this information to a Crystal report, generate that if we had that associated with the event, and then we're going to send that all off to the customer. If that's all been completed, we're going to then we're going to stop, or if there needs to be more notifications, we're just going to keep repeating the process until all the emails have gone out. And here's a sample of the invoices we looked at before, but just to mention the different styling options that we have. The notification is broken down into several components. We have the logos, we have the header and footer, and this is the standard setup that all of our notifications would be using. So you can customize each one of these blocks in our interface. Here's an example of the modular format, and you can see how each section here is a different dynamic message that can be added in. Example of the PDF invoice. And then within the PDF itself, we actually customize the notifications. We're going to add on all kinds of custom messages and things like that. As we mentioned before, you can add in static attachments. These are files that be included with the notification. So this is a great option when it comes to email invoicing to add some additional marketing and sales related information. Okay, and then we write back everything that we do with the invoicing process gets written back to SedonaOffice. So all the notes of us pulling it from the queue, all the information about it being delivered to the customer is all recorded back to the notes using the actions module as we discussed earlier. And we can review all this information within our interface as well. So if you needed to look at specifically what was happening event by event, you can come in here and take a look at that as well. And we send out some additional reports based on what happened each night with our invoicing process. And we did the same thing with our collections process as well. Some additional notifications that you could take advantage of through us is our ACH payments posted. This will be a listing of all the payments that have actually posted to the customer kind of as a receipt or a confirmation. We can do an internal notification or an external notification about the credit cards about to expire. So if you want to send a list internally, or if you want to send it to the customer saying their card's going to expire, we can set up that notification. And if the payment does fail, we can set up a failure message to the customer with instructions on how to rectify the payment. Here's an example of that payment receipt and a payment failure. I'm going to skip a little bit through the collections process here, but essentially we've got the same method that we can do with our invoicing, we could do with our statements as well. And we do this in a couple different ways. We can do a friendly statement, which is going to be just a series of information about the open invoices and the aging information. And then we can actually change the messages out dynamically based on how past due the customer is. And we follow the statement rules that you use to generate your statements in SedonaOffice. We also can provide this as a full-fledged statement as PDF or HTML. And one of the nice features, and this is where we're going to start talking about a little bit about web services, is when you deliver a notification and you have our web services application, the invoice numbers become hyperlinks within the statement. That means that the customer can actually click on each one of those invoice numbers and get a copy of the invoice for that was associated with that statement item. So it goes out, it generates the invoice in real time and sends that back to the customer right through the browser. So it's real time. Okay? It doesn't require any kind of login or anything like that. It's all done securely through our web services. Essentially, they click the link and the PDF file is delivered to them. Let's skip a little bit through here. This is just the setup for the collections process. We're going to essentially, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to age all the customers. We're going to then run the list of statements that need to be sent out, and we're going to send that to the email queue. And then the email queue is actually going to send those statements out. and we just keep updating the queue every time we send the statement out. Now, in addition to the statements being sent, we also send out a confirmation email beforehand, giving a list of everybody that's going to get a statement and anybody that's not going to get a statement because of various reasons that should. Either they have a missing email or they're not set up for statements, things like that. Okay. Templates are essentially the same process. The big thing here is that the content of the message can be changed out based on how past due they are. We add in, of course, our AutoPay messages will help, promote AutoPay and prevent them from going past due, hopefully. Okay. So let's talk about let's get off invoicing and statements a little bit and talk about some of the other types of notifications we can do. So one popular notification is our tomorrow's ticket. So as we talked about to the customer, a reminder that they have an appointment coming up. We could also do an internal notification to a technician saying, here's a listing of all your appointments. And we actually can just list all the appointments in a single email. This is set up with hyperlinks in it that takes them out to the maps and things like that on their phone or their iPad or whatnot. So this is a great add-on that you can use along with the FSU so they get a notification ahead of time of everything they expect to see in the FSU. They get their email here. But this also gives you the opportunity to deliver additional information to the customer. I'm sorry, to the technician, things like maybe they need to take a inspection survey, or they need to fill out a certain form for this customer, or there's a certain process or procedure that they have to follow. We could add that type of information into the notification that they would get. So here we can see that one of them is listed as a key account. That's a concept that OPT created that says that this customer is a VIP and is part of a larger group of customers. This is just notifying the technician that, hey, this is part of a key account. Okay, so we also can interface this information directly with Manitou, and this is a great example of a cross event that's talking to both systems. We've gone ahead and looked at Manitou and realized that the customer is technically on test still, but the technician has just left the site. They've departed themselves but left themselves on test. So what we do is we look at the system account number in SedonaOffice, we parse that down and look for the on-test information in Manitou, and if the two line up, then we send out a notification to the technician saying, hey, listen, you guys need to take a look at this. You can't leave the customer off task like that. Ticket status report is a simple internal series of reports that we can send, based on the ticket's life cycle. So is it departed, needing a go back, or is it departed and it's not closed yet, or the tickets are list of the tickets are closed and not invoiced, things like that. So using different criteria, we can create different notifications that would help your internal department, process the tickets and move from one stage to the next. Purchase order notifications for your AP and inventory side, letting them know jobs that don't have purchase orders, or the following purchase orders have been open more than a certain number of days, or parts that have less than their minimum quantities, as we mentioned before. On the customer relations side, we can send out notifications that go to the customers, things like we mentioned the appointments coming up. And our current notification has the ability to add in a confirm or reschedule button as well that would send back a notification to your internal service department saying, listen, the customer can't make this appointment. Helps avoid truck rolls. Okay. We can send out a dispatch notification saying your technician is on the way. We can actually include a photo there. That's one of the custom modules we use within the interfaces. We can store the technician's photo along with the technician. That would then be used for the notification. Okay, and then we're going to talk a little bit in a minute about next we're going to talk about our surveys. So we can send out a survey to the customer based on a closure of a service ticket or a job saying, we're glad that, excuse me, we'd like to send you a survey, see if you would be willing to take a question, an NPS question, which is the Net Promoter Score. We can say, based on your recent interaction with us, how likely are you to recommend us to your friends and family, things like that. So that's a typical questionnaire that we would do. Based on how they answer that score is usually everything you need to know about how the customer is feeling. So we allow the customer to click on the score there. It brings them out to a customized survey that we can we can set your logo and your look and feel and things like that. The questions are then answered, and the information is actually recorded using our web services back to SedonaOffice. So as they take that survey, we actually record that back as a field note into SedonaOffice. And in our web services, we have the ability to then look at how that information is shaping up. So we can see the number of scores coming back in. We can see the distribution by type. And we can even go down as far as looking at the individual technicians and see what their scores are as well. So we rank the information by technician. We also rank that information now by branch. We can rank it by the salesperson or by the installer service company, things like that as well. Looking at the details, we can drill into each individual score and see all the information that came back for those different surveys. We could do things with the sales leads in SedonaOffice. So you have the prospects. We could take a look at those prospects. We can actually email those prospects out to the salespeople and send a management level report here of all the leads that are coming in. Some examples of reports that would be used from a management perspective, we can look at the service flash report. This is a great report that's going to tell us everything that's going on with our service companies for the month. How many tickets we opened, how many tickets we closed, what our billing looks like for those tickets. And some great numbers here that I like is, currently open tickets are resolved with no service or serviced within a single appointment. What's my percentage of go backs there? All right, and this is a trending report, so we're actually looking at the monthly totals there as well. We're looking at the year-to-date totals and what the each year's ending figures look like, so we can see what the progression is, year by year, if we're getting any better at issues. Another great purchase price variance report that's going to show us anytime we ordered a part that's above or below what our standard cost is, if you're using standard costing in SedonaOffice. And this can be sent to a warehouse manager to go review to see why that equipment is being ordered at a loss or is we're spending too much money on it. And they can adjust the costing accordingly, or find a different vendor for the part, or reevaluate if that's the part that they need to be selling. We took a look at the financial flash report before. This is an example just where we would grab different pieces of single information from different areas within the application, just put it all in one report and give it out to an owner or something like that at the end of the day. And here's another example of a report that where we're grabbing different pieces of information here. We're actually looking at two different scenarios. We're looking at systems that have a number of open tickets, but those tickets were open within a number of days. Some internal service ticket and installation process metrics. So we actually measuring the times it takes for your departments to create the service ticket, to get somebody out to that appointment, to actually resolve the appointment, and we would deliver that with the notes that went along with that ticket or that job. Is a statistical AutoPay report letting us know how many customers are on our AutoPay, day by day, if we're increasing or getting a larger number of customers. As we mentioned, we're integrated along with Manitou, so we can do a Manitou online, offline report, letting us know all the customers that are online there. We can look at that dealer by dealer. And one of the great reports we have is our late to test reports out of Manitou. We make that process a lot easier. The reports are a lot cleaner on our side because we're just doing a standard notification. But in addition, we're also comparing the information with SedonaOffice, so we can look at trends like the customer's late to test, but also past due, and that kind of indicate if there's a problem there that they've stopped paying, maybe they've changed central stations or something like that. That you might need to be aware of. And we can break those reports down by different types. We can look at it, by the different system types and things like that. We actually can create this as a report file, as an Excel file, using the Actions module. We talked a little bit on test here. And so basically, we have quite a few different types of notifications and events that are available. And we have them in all different areas of the applications, everything from the accounting side to the service and installation, flash reports, sales reports. We have stuff that helps with data entry, inventory, Manitou. The list keeps going on. The best option here is really just go ahead and take a look at our website. That's optbusinessservices.com. And there's a lot of information up there about the different types of events and some samples and things like that that we have available, including some special pricing for suites and packages. Those are groups of notifications that we usually give and discount, for the package. Our email invoicing is an example of that, where we include several different notifications with that suite. That's a little bit about SedonaSync. And just before I let you guys go here, we'll go into question and answer. I just want to talk a little bit about the web services for a second here, and just showcase some of the things that we have here, and kind of tell you about how it's working along with SedonaSync. So the web services application is it's a web app that we load along with your Sedona web or your Sedona dashboard, things like that. But it's allowing us to connect to all different types of data sources, not just a few databases, but we can integrate with third-party APIs. We can integrate with other solutions and things, different things like Salesforce or Suite CRM. FormStack is what we integrate with our surveys. And we created a lot of different modules that go along with our web services. So we have the ability to create reports on demand. We can do real-time dashboards. We have a customer profit and loss system in there. Our service reconciliation module, which I'll talk about in a second. We have our customers at risk, the ability to flag a customer at risk. And then the key account package, kind of what we talked about before, which is the ability for us to kind of create a VIP group and set up notifications to that. But what the web services does for us with SedonaSync is allows us to extend the functionality out with certain things that SedonaSync just can't do. For instance, your SedonaSync can't send out a Sedona document. However, we've created a module in web services that allows you to grab the link for the document, associate it with the notification, and when the customer gets the email that says, here, click here to view your document, it's going to take them out to web services and serve up that document. In addition, we've moved a lot of the functionality of our interface into the web services application to make it really easy for you to check the logs, look at the information coming and going, and whatnot. In addition, most of our notifications that go out or that have report style data in it, we can integrate links back to the web services in those reports. So it may show a few different pieces of information in the email notification, but then the user can click a link to go to live information in the dashboard. So the two kind of work hand in hand. So the service reconciliation module, which is something we're going to talk about in the next session on web services. But quickly, this is a module that allows us to compare our bills with SedonaOffice. So the bills that we get from Honeywell and AlarmNet, all the different providers, we can actually import that information back in and create a reconciliation between those bills and your customers in SedonaOffice. And we could do that each month, and we just essentially grab the CSV file, the Excel file that comes in from those providers, and then we just do that reconciliation that allows us to see if the accounts are loaded in SedonaOffice or if they're loaded on the bill. If they're missing, maybe we forgot to turn them offline and whatnot. This is an example of the dashboard here, just really showcases here the different options where we can see the customers. We have 24 customers in the bill that were missing in Sedona. I have 143 in Sedona that are missing on the bill. They were never taken offline, or that we're still billing the customer. And then, like I said, the 24 that are in the bill that we're being billed for but isn't in SedonaOffice. For example, this one here, I've got 2 charges, and I'm not billing for it in SedonaOffice anywhere. Okay. Sorry. The next thing is our integration. So within the Sedona office, if you're an OPT customer, you've already probably started seeing this. You'll start seeing OPT buttons popping up in different areas of the application. This allows us to quickly jump from SedonaOffice into the web services dashboard and actually back. So you'll see the buttons like, for instance, at the top of SedonaOffice. That's going to take us out to information that's relevant for the whole company, whereas buttons on the customer and on the system and the site are going to take us to information that's relevant to the customer, system, and site. And we have those buttons in several different areas of the application. Okay, and in addition, in the web services side, we actually can jump quickly from web services back into SedonaOffice now. So if you've pulled up a customer and you're looking at some details in web services, now you can jump into SedonaOffice to see that customer there as well. And this is an example of a notification that we had sent out to a customer, about their go back queue. Here's a listing of all the tickets that are in the go back queue, and there was a button in there that took them out to the dashboard that showed them here are the list of tickets that it currently is right now. So they got maybe the notification on a Monday morning, and throughout the week they kept clicking on the button that took them out to the dashboard and kept updating the information in real time for them. And this is an example of the customer landing page. So this is basically when you're in a customer, you can jump out to this information, which shows all different types of details, including what we've been doing on behalf of that customer. As I mentioned before, we write all those notes to the customer activity log. This will let us see that here. But also we have a module that shows you the profit and loss of that customer, as well as the ability to look at the customers that are potentially at risk and other things like that. And this has been expanded quite a bit since the screenshot was done. As we talked about the customers at risk, that's the ability for us to flag a customer at risk and potentially even create a case that allows us to track what's going on with that customer and trying to resolve the issue. We can write all kinds of notes in there, and all that information is synchronized back with SedonaOffice as well. All right, so that's web services. I know we went over a lot of stuff today, and I'd love to have an opportunity to show you guys more with the web service and kind of get into some of the details there. But for now, I think what we're going to do is we're going to open up to a Q&A. If anybody has any questions, we can go from there.
Hey, Brad, it's Sam here on the line. I can jump in and actually read these questions to you if you want to just be available to answer so you're not having to multitask.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Take it from the top here with Sam Korf. Can you send us the Database Explorer link on the Sedona website?
Yep. So that's going to be, yeah, that's something you got. Yeah, it's up there, and it should be on the tools, same place where you would download the release notes and all the different documentation. I believe it's listed there, if my memory serves me correctly.
Perfect. What is the variable used to show total returned records put in the footer?
Total returned records in the footer. That's a good question. Okay, so you want to see, yeah, so that's not going to be done in a SedonaSync application because the SedonaSync is going to write the report or the notification one record at a time. So you're not going to be able to look at any kind of total information like that to be able to add that in. So you might want to use that and talk more about a dashboard for that. It's a little, SedonaSync is going to obviously work a little different than an Excel report would be because you're firing it off record by record. Now, as we mentioned, you have the ability to do the begin and repeat, but even that is going to use the message break, which is not going to show you the counts per record. You can structure the queries by using sum and counts and things like that. It's a little bit more of an advanced topic, but you really need to structure the query accordingly to do that. But it's not, when you do that, you're going to lose the detail of the individual records. I hope that answered the question.
Okay, next one, moving on here. Is the OPT sync interface available to users to create events or just for the events created by OPT? We use events created
So
by
that's
OPT, but I would like to also work on some smaller ones myself.
absolutely. So that's a great question. The sync event or the sync interface rather will work with both your events and our events. In order to use it with your own events, you do need to set this sync event up a certain way. And if you reach out to us, we can do a quick training to show you how to do that. Essentially, as I mentioned, we have all of our events use event numbers, but if you want to create your own events, we have a block of numbers reserved for our customers to create their own. And so you would create an event using, let's say, 9,000 or something like that, and then you can go into the interface and set it up there.
Okay, next question here. Does the test alert work for SIMS integration as well?
We haven't built it for SIMS, but SIMS could, if it's a SQL database, we can certainly look at creating it. We haven't been exposed to the database, so we would probably work with you a little closely to see and whatnot. But there's really no reason why it couldn't be as long as it's a SQL database. We don't require any kind of integration between the data other than a piece of data that matches both your SedonaOffice and your central station database.
Will you be adding interfacing to WeSuite?
So the WeSuite, we can certainly do things with WeSuite. If you have an example of specific needs or requirements that you have there, we work closely with Tracy to take a look at the different things that need to be done there. If it's something that works out of the WeSuite application, we'll probably direct you that way first. And then if there's something that's outside the scope of what WeSuite can do, we can take a look at that and work with the WeSuite team to help deliver that event to you guys.
All right, our next one is an individual about pricing, so we're gonna shoot that off to her individually and keep moving down. This is just, it says record count, but I'm not sure. Okay, perfect. Next one. Is there an event for customer service follow-up? Service not related to service tickets for tracking our customer care department?
Sure. So we could create an event just to do just about anything, but the goal is to figure out what piece of data triggers it off. In our web services, we have the ability to create tasks. So there's a task management process that you can use that does send off notifications and follow-ups and things like that. So essentially, you would put in, I need to do X, Y, and Z for the customer, and then you can set up a due date when you want to get that follow-up notification. And that doesn't require you to enter a service ticket. It's just a task that needs to be done. That's part of our task management system in the web services. But if you want to do something out of Sedona directly, you would just need to be able to identify what's the triggering information. As for our customer service follow-up, are we basing it off of a closed service ticket or a job or something like that? So that would be the thing we'd have to look at there.
We push from Manitou to SedonaOffice using non-recurring charges. We do not store subscriber information in SedonaOffice. Is using SedonaSync to email invoices still possible?
So that's a good question. The question, I guess, would be is if the invoice out of SedonaOffice has enough information today to, if you were to print it out and mail it to the customer, if that's enough information, then it should be enough information to email it, aside from the email address itself. We would just need to make sure that we could somehow get the email address into the bill record in SedonaOffice. But the rest of the subscriber information that you claim, I would have to take a look at that particular case. Reach out to us and we could do a webinar and take a look at exactly how your system is set up.
We are currently using the survey, but which email address is OPT pulling from to send the survey? And if the email is incorrect, how do we update to resubmit the survey?
Sure. So that's going to depend on which survey you have. If you're doing it off of a service ticket, we have two ways to fire off the service ticket survey. We can either use the auto notify on the service ticket, or we have a concept called dynamic contact. That is, if we see that there is no email address on the service ticket, we'll default back to the billing email address and send the survey there. If there's no valid email address there, then the survey is not going to go out. You can then add an email address after the fact, but if the service ticket's closed, it's probably not going to qualify. So we would have to work with you to understand if you would want to set up notifications for surveys after the service ticket is closed if an email address is added later on. It can be done. It's just a custom configuration that we would set up for you.
Okay, we have a question on invoice notifications. Will the email notifications be one for one per invoice? Customers that have multiple accounts and receive on one email. Can the PDF invoices be grouped into one email? That makes sense?
Yes, and
Read it back
the
to
answer
you.
is
Okay.
no. The answer is with those, the notification will always be one email per invoice. Now, a statement is obviously an exception there. A statement's going to give it a list of all the invoices, and they can click on the individual links there to open the statements if you have web services. But the invoicing notification is transactional, meaning that it is going to be one email per invoice. And that's not an OPT limitation. That's actually a SedonaSync limitation. There is no way for it to have multiple reports attached to a single email notification.
Okay, if we use your event, if we use your events like 9,000 times, is this billable each time to us?
So it's the using our events, meaning the firing off. We don't charge, obviously per instance of the event if you fire it off a bunch of times. So if you send out, a dispatch notification 10,000 times, it's not going to be charged that way. The way we base our licensing is strictly off of the number of different types of notifications you have. And there's different pricing options available there. If you wanted to take a notification and just make a duplicate copy of it, an example of this would be a notification that fires off on a job task being completed. You may have 2 or 3 different copies of that notification using different job tasks. We have a special pricing model available for that.
Okay, is it possible to do a simple sync that will alert an employee anytime a job is in the queue that has a task relevant to the employee which has not been signed off without that task being the current task? This would need to be an email to the employee with a list of the jobs with those open tasks.
Okay, well, there's nothing simple about that, but yes, it is possible. We actually have a dashboard that specifically does that. We just created it recently based on a customer need. It will show you a listing of all the job tasks that you have the approval to sign off on. The challenge there is obviously knowing the user what tasks are assigned to them, because there is no concept of assigned tasks in SedonaOffice. There's only approval levels, meaning that a user can or cannot sign off on that task, but doesn't say that they own that task in a job. So that becomes a little complex. The short answer is we can create a notification to do that. We have the structure and the logic already created to do it. But right now it's just as a dashboard.
I can send you this, Brad, if this doesn't, if I cannot speak this in the way that the question is intended. But the question is,
sure.
Does your HTML editor preserve the begin star repeat / end star repeat tags?
So the HTML editor itself is not going to include those particular tags. Those tags have to be put in at the SedonaSync level. There's a limitation about including those tags in the variables. I filed that with the manufacturer to say that we'd like that as a change request. But for right now, there's 3 tags that or 3 blocks of data. We have the header, we have the footer, and we have the in-between. And the reason we have those 3 blocks is because the in-between block, if you will, is sitting between those 2 tags on the event. So when we install the events in SedonaSync, they're essentially just those 3 blocks with those repeat tags in between. Those tags can't come through to our editor.
Okay, can a customer receive both an email invoice notification and a paper invoice mailed to them? We have government accounts that the email invoices go to one place and they want the paper invoices mailed to each location.
It can be set up to do that. Yeah, if you have a there's an option to do the printed cycle, and we did this with one customer where we added it in, but it is a custom process that we have to create for you, but it can be done.
Okay, and the last one, and this is another good one for you, Brad. Can we get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation for today's webinar? So if you shoot that over to me, I'll post it on the website. Is that something you're okay with doing?
Sure. Actually, this presentation was actually a combination of several different PowerPoints that I've tinkered with going between the three. I will give you guys a listing of the individual PowerPoints we can put up there, but they're actually available on our website currently as well, along with several other PowerPoints, and I can shoot out the link to that as well.
Awesome. Everyone is saying thank you, and we appreciate your time, Brad, and everyone on the call. Thank you so much for being here. Brad, do you have any closing remarks?
That's pretty much it. Thanks everybody for your time. Sorry if I started a little bit today. Webinars are a little tricky for me. I do better with a one-on-one or a group of people I can talk to. But you know what? I'm glad to show you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're always looking for a new challenge or something that to try to see if we could solve your particular needs and whatnot. As Lori mentioned before, if you guys aren't using us, certainly reach out and we'd love to give you guys a one-on-one demonstration of how it can really help you guys out. And it's a really, really powerful add-on when you're talking about setting up the sync notifications, because they're very difficult to do out of the box if you don't have any kind of coding. With us, we're really a full service. We're going to handhold you guys through the start to finish of the notification, and we're going to test it. We're going to make sure it works. We'll give you guys some feedback on the design. So we're really full service there, and we're not going to let you have to worry about the code.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming, and we will have this presentation posted on our website within the next 48 hours. So look out for an email notification from me when that's all set. Thanks so much, and we will see you at the next Sedona seminar.
Awesome. Take care, guys.